she's not very polite or saying things that. So Laurie is, Jo comes across as blunt, who says what is on her mind, does not try and be politically correct. But people know she's saying this not because she's rude, but because she cares. He says that he didn't feel bad about Laurie's remark about his shyness because he knew that she's a kind person. She's full of goodwill. So he should not feel bad about Jo because she means what she is saying out of kindness. She comes from a good place. She's not saying this to hurt him. She's saying this to help him. Do you like your school? Asked the boy, changing the subject after a little pause, during which he stared at the fire and Jo looked about her, well pleased. So there's a small silence where, because Laurie is shy, he's looking into the fire, he's not looking at her, and Jo is looking around at the house. And she's happy to see the place. Don't go to school, I'm a businessman. Girl, I mean. I do wait on my great aunt, and a dear cross old soul she is, to answer Jo. So she says, I don't go to school, I wait on my great aunt. Laurie opened his mouth to ask another question, but remembering just in time that it wasn't manners to make too many inquiries into people's affairs, he shut it again and looked uncomfortable. So a lot of questions came into Laurie's mind to, there was so much he wanted to ask her. But then he remembered, nahi, I should not ask too many questions about someone's personal life. It is rude. It is bad manners. So he shut his mouth and he looked uncomfortable. Jo liked his good breeding and didn't mind having a laugh at Aunt March, so she gave him a lively description of the fidgety old lady, her fat poodle, and the parrot that talked Spanish, and the library where she reveled. So Jo understood very quickly that he had a lot of questions, but he's not asking out of politeness. So she goes on and tells him about Aunt March. She gives him a very detailed description about the old lady, her poodle, her parrot, and the library where she spends her time. Laurie enjoyed that immensely. And when she told about the prim old gentleman who had come once to woo Aunt March, and in the middle of a fine speech, how Paul had tweaked his wig off to his great dismay, the boy lay back and laughed till the tears ran down his cheeks, and a maid popped her head to see what was the matter. So when Laurie, she was telling Laurie that this old man, he had come to woo Aunt March, and when he was trying to impress her, his wig fell off his head, and when Laurie heard this, he laughed so much that tears ran down his face. And when the maid heard the noise, she came to the room to see what happened. So they were making so much noise. They were laughing and having a good time. Oh, that does me no of good. Tell on, please, he said, taking his face out of the sofa cushion, red and shining with merriment. So he's enjoying the conversation. He's like, tell me more. Much elated with her success, Jo did tell on all about their plays and plans, their hopes and futures for father, and the most interesting events of the little world in which the sisters lived. Then they got to talking about books, and to Jo's delight, she found that Laurie loved them as well as she did and had read even more than herself. So she told him all about her family, her father, her sisters, and when they came to talk about books, Joe was happy that he also loves to read. And in fact, he's read more books than Joe herself. If you like them so much, come down and see us. Grandfather is out, so you needn't be afraid, said Laurie, getting up. I'm not afraid of anything, returned Joe with a toss of her head. So he says, if you like reading, I can take you to our library. Grandpa is not here, so there's nothing to worry. And Joe says, I'm not afraid of your grandfather. I don't believe you are, exclaimed the boy, looking at her with much admiration, though he privately thought she would have good reason to be a trifle afraid of the old gentleman if she met him in one of his moods. So he's impressed with her, with the fact that she's not afraid, but he's thinking to himself that if you meet the old man when he's in a bad mood, you are going to be afraid of him. The atmosphere of the whole house being summer-like, Laurie led the way from room to room, letting Joe stop to examine whatever struck her fancy. And so at last they came to the library, where she clapped her hands and pranced as she always did when especially delighted. It was lined with books, and there were pictures and statues and distracting little cabinets full of coins and curiosities and sleepy hollow chairs and queer tables and bronzes, and best of all, a great open fireplace with quaint tiles all around it. So Joe had a very simple house, right? So when she went to the library, she was admiring everything that she saw on the way to the library. And when she actually reached the library, she was very delighted, and she started clapping her hands with happiness. So there were pictures there, there were statues there were cabinets full of little nitty-gritty knickknacks and coins. There were different kinds of tables, chairs, and there was a big fireplace with tiles. What richness, sighed Joe, sinking into the depth of a velour chair and gazing about her with an air of intense satisfaction. She's like, wow, there is so much richness all around me, right? So she could see that the family is very rich, very well off. Theodore Lawrence, you ought to be the happiest boy in the world, she said impressively. She says, Lawrence, you live in this house, you live in this place, you should be the happiest boy in the world. A fellow can't live on books, said Laurie, shaking his head. He says, just books are not enough. You need more. Before he could say more, a bell rang and Joe flew up, exclaiming with alarm, mercy me, it's your grandpa. Well, what if it is? You're not afraid of anything, returned the boy, looking wicked. So suddenly, Joe panics and says, your grandfather is coming. And Laurie says, but you're not afraid of him. Abhi to tumne bola tumhe dar nahi lagta. Why are you afraid now? I think I am a little afraid of him, but I don't know why I should be. Mommy said I might come, and I don't think you're any worse for it, said Joe, composing herself, though she kept her eyes on the door. So Joe is saying that I'm not really afraid of him because I took permission to come here, and I have not done anything wrong in the house. I have not broken anything. I'm not a bad person, so why should I be afraid? So he says, I'm a great deal better for it and ever so much obliged. I'm only afraid you're very tired of talking to me. It was so pleasant. I couldn't bear to stop, said Laurie gratefully. Laurie says, in fact, it's good for me that you came, but you've been talking so much, I think you're tired. But I love to hear you talk. The doctor here to see you, sir, and the maid beckoned as she spoke. Would you mind if I left you for a minute? I suppose I must see him, said Laurie. So then we see that a doctor has come to see Laurie. Don't mind me, I'm happy as a cricket here, answered Joe. So Laurie leaves Joe in the library and goes to see his doctor. Laurie went away and his guest amused herself in her own way. She was standing before a fine portrait of an old gentleman When the door opened again and without turning, she said decidedly, I'm sure now that I shouldn't be afraid of him, for he's got kind eyes, though his mouth is grim and he looks as if he had a tremendous will of his own. He isn't as handsome as my grandfather, but I like him. So she's looking at the portrait of the old gentleman, and when she hears a noise behind her, she says, he's not as handsome as my grandfather, but I like him. He's a kind person. She doesn't know who's standing behind her. Thank you, ma'am, said a gruff voice behind her, and to her great dismay stood old Mr. Lawrence. She thought it's Laurie, and she said, I've decided that I'm not going to be afraid of your grandpa because he's got kind eyes and he's not as handsome as my grandfather, but I like him. And the old man says, thank you, ma'am. And Jo is petrified. She's like, oh my God, I was talking about this man to this man. This is so rude. Poor Jo blushed till she couldn't blush any redder, and her heart began to beat uncomfortably fast as she thought what she had said. For a minute, a wild desire to run away possessed her, but that was cowardly, and the girls would laugh at her. So she resolved to stay and get out of the scrape as she could. A second look showed her that the living eyes under the bushy eyebrows were kinder than even the painted ones, and there was a sly twinkle in them which lessened her fear a great deal. So initially she thought, let me just run away. Then she was like, no, my sisters will make fun of me. Let me stay here. And when she does, she looks at the old man. She sees he actually has very kind eyes. And his eyes in reality are even kinder than the ones in the picture. The gruff voice was gruffer than ever as the old man said abruptly after a dreadful pause, so you're not afraid of me, huh? Not much, sir. And you didn't think of me as handsome as your grandfather? He says, I'm not as handsome as your grandfather? Not quite, sir. And I've got a tremendous will, have I? I only said I thought so. But you like me in spite of it. Yes, I do, sir. So he repeated to her what she had said. That answer pleased the old gentleman. He gave a short laugh, shook hands with her, and putting his finger under her chin, turned up her face, examined it gravely, and let it go, saying with a nod, you've got your grandfather's spirit if you haven't his face. He was a fine man, my dear, but what is better, he was a brave and an honest one, and I was proud to be his friend. So suddenly, the old man tells her that he knew her grandfather and she has her grandfather's spirit, and he respected her grandfather as being someone very brave and honest. Thank you, sir, said Jo, quite comfortable after that, as it suited her exactly. What have you been doing to this boy of mine, huh? So then he's like, what are you doing with Laurie? Only trying to be neighborly, sir. And Jo told how her visit came about. So she said, I'm just trying to be a good neighbor. You think he needs cheering up a bit, do you? Yes, sir. He seems a little bit lonely and young folks would do him good, perhaps. We are only girls, but we should be glad to help if we could, for we don't forget the splendid Christmas present you sent us. Tut, tut, tut. That was the boy's affair. How's the poor woman? So she says, you sent us a gift on Christmas. We are thankful to you and we would be happy to cheer up Laurie and give him some company, even though we are all only girls. I don't have a brother who can give Laurie company. Doing nicely, sir. So he's asking about the mother. And off went Jo, talking very fast. All she had told about the Hummels, in whom her mother has interested richer friends than they were. So, so then she told him about the family, that a poor family whom March family helps. So Joe herself, her family is not very well off, but there's another family who's poorer than them, and the March family helps them. Just her father's way of doing good. I shall come and see your mother some fine day. Tell her so. There's the tea bell. We shall have it early on the boy's account. Come down and go on being neighborly. If you'd like to have me, sir. So he says, now you can come and have, as a good neighbor, you can come and have tea with us. So because of my son, we are going to have tea early. Shouldn't you ask if I didn't? Shouldn't ask you if I didn't, said Mr. Lawrence, offered her his arm in the old-fashioned courtesy. What would Meg say to this, thought Joe as she marched away with her eyes dancing with fun as she imagined herself telling the story at home. So, Joe has not only made friends with Laurie, but also with Mr. Lawrence. Mr. Lawrence also seems to like her. Okay. Now let's move on to the questions. Okay. Joe's decision to make friends with the lonely boy next door proves to be a good one. Right? Joe is full of energy. She's chirpy, talkative, energetic. She's a great reader. She's a good person. And when she sees this lonely neighbor, she decides to approach him. And that ends up being a good decision. So elaborate, talk about it in detail. You can begin your sentence with, Joe was a bold, friendly, and warm person. So you can begin this with, Joe was a bold, friendly, and warm person. She noticed that Laurie, the lonely boy next door, had no companions and spent most of his time alone. Instead of being shy, she took the initiative to befriend him. So Laurie didn't talk to her, so she decided to talk to Laurie instead. Her kindness made Laurie happy and helped him overcome his loneliness. Through their friendship, the two families became closer. Laurie found a true friend in Joe, while Joe gained a caring companion. So her decision to make friends with Laurie proved to be a good one, right? So both of them ended up getting good friends. Joe ended up with a very kind Laurie, and Laurie ended up with the chirpy, lively, caring Joe, right? Read the extract being neighborly and complete the following sentences. To Joe, the fine house seemed like a kind of enchanted palace. Right? She talks about it. Control C, Control F. Okay. So the house, she describes it as an enchanted place. In the beginning of the story, if you see, when she looked at the house, here, to Joe's lively fancy, this fine house seemed to seem a kind of enchanted palace, right? So this is her description of the place. An enchanted palace. Joe swept the path around the garden for, initially she's removing the snow, she's clearing the path in the garden so that Beth can walk. She can go for her evening walk. For Beth to walk in. Right? Joe entered the old stone house carrying a covered dish and some flowers. What else did she carry? Here. Says looks too pretty to eat. So she says, I'm here bag and baggage. So she's got the dish. She's got the cats, probably the soft toys, right? So the cats, a covered dish and some cats to play with. So every sister had sent something for Joe, something for Laurie. Okay. All right. In order to tidy the room, she put the books and things in order and made the room neat. So when Laurie complains that the servants don't organize the room properly, she quickly, while talking to Laurie, she organizes the room and she puts things in order. Okay. Bring out the contrast between the two houses with the help of the following. So you can contrast the houses. So one is an old brown house, the other is newly painted and fine stone mansion. House of March has untidy grounds. House of Lawrence has well-kept grounds. They've got gardeners and whatnot to maintain the ground. House of March has children playing all around and lots of noise and chirpiness and movement. House of Lawrence, on the other hand, has one single child there, a lonely boy who lives there with maids and servants and his grandfather. But the House of March is a warm and cheerful place, and in the House of Lawrence, no motherly face smiled at the windows because there is no woman in the house. He doesn't have a mother. Right? Now, the traits in the characters you meet in the extract are jumbled. Sort them out and write it in the appropriate columns. So, you can, these are all the traits. You can put them in the right column. So, Laurie is shy. Joe is bold. Grandpa is gruff. Grandpa is also friendly. Laurie is withdrawn. Perceptive, empathetic, playful, adventurous, sharp, dull, mature, frank, gentlemanly, happy, lonely. So, Grandpa is sharp. Joe is adventurous. Laurie is dull. Grandpa is mature. Joe is frank. Grandpa is gentlemanly. Joe is a happy person. Laurie is lonely. Playful. Joe is playful. Grandpa is also playful. Empathetic. Grandpa. He sends them a gift on Christmas. Right? Joe is perceptive. She's perceptive. Looking at the portrait of the grandfather, she's able to gauge his personality. Right? She's able to describe him based on the portrait she had seen in the library. Write down in your own words, Laurie, the way Laurie confirmed the names of the March sisters. So how does she mention the? So yes, Laurie is describing the sisters. Because he's seen those sisters out of the window, right? He says, yeah. He says the pretty one is Meg, the curly head is Amy, right? So he calls, he describes Meg as the pretty one and Amy is the one with colored hair, curly hair. So this is how he describes. The girls, Beth stayed mostly at home and Jo was the lively girl who often visited him. So this is how he describes the March sisters. Okay, now this is about the brief interaction between Jo and the grandfather. Right? So you can write this in your own words. When Jo is looking at the portrait, she thinks she's talking to Laurie, but actually Grandpa is standing behind her. So, but when Jo visited Mr. Lawrence, she spoke to him confidently and politely. Although he looked stern is strict. At first, he was pleased by Jo's frank and cheerful manner. He saw that she was a good girl, she was a smart girl, and she was polite and respectful. So he liked that about her. They talked warmly, and Jo's friendliness impressed him. By the end of their meeting, Mr. Lawrence had developed a liking for Jo and appreciated her kindness towards Laurie. Okay. Now, find proverbs, maxims, and idioms related to friendship. Birds of a feather flock together. There are so many proverbs and maxims and idioms that you can find related to that. I have a few for you here. Birds of a feather flock together. A friend in need is a friend indeed. Friendship doubles joy and halves sorrow. True friends are hard to find. Make new friends, but keep the old. Okay. So when you make new friends, don't forget your old friends. Okay. The extract deals with the atmosphere of the two homes. Collect the words associated with home, library, and garden. Just give me 1 second. Yeah. So all the adjectives that describe the home, the library, and the garden, you can list them. Here you go. Okay. So the home is described as warm, cheerful, family members, comfort, and full of children. Library. Library is full of books, lot of space for reading, shelves, study, knowledge, all these words that are associated with. So these books may or may not be in the story, but they're related to the term. Garden, when you think of a garden, you think of flowers, trees, lawns, paths, shrubs, grass, flowers. So when you think of a garden, these are the words that come to mind. Now question 5 is about indirect speech. Okay. This is interesting. Use your imagination and extend the story about 100 to 150 words. So you can extend the story. What do you think happened when Jo goes home? What does she tell the Mart sisters? Will they be impressed that she was able to impress Mr. Lawrence? Right? So how is she going to show off? How is she going to talk excitedly and happily about what happened? How afraid she was, but she didn't run. And then Mr. Lawrence invited her to tea and what conversations they had and everything about Laurie and Mr. Lawrence. So you can write about that as an extension of this. These are all writing activities that you must do. These are the kind of questions that come in your exams. ये आपको लिखना चाहिए. You must write. Okay? Okay. जैसे एक ये extend the story हो गया. दूसरा, make a note in your exercise book about how people amuse themselves in earlier times without TV, internet, or social media. So think of a time when there was no TV, when there was no internet. So how did people keep themselves amused? How did they entertain themselves? So they probably played board games, they sang songs, they enacted plays, they told each other jokes, they probably had dance sessions, you put on some music and you dance, right? So write about all these things that people probably did to spend their time when there was no internet, right? Okay. Are friends different from neighbors? Are you friends with your neighbors? So friends are different from neighbors. You can choose your friends, but you can't choose your neighbors, right? But we can be friends with our neighbors if we are polite, if we are respectful, right? If we, like we saw, Jo became friends with her neighbor, right? So yes, friends and neighbors are different. Neighbors are people who live near us, but friends are people we love, we trust, and they understand us. They do not live. They may live near us, they may not live near us. However, neighbors can also become good friends. Yes, I'm friendly with my neighbors. We can help one another during emergencies, celebrate festivals together, and often spend time talking and playing games. So I've got very friendly neighbors who are very helpful, very supportive. If I need something, if I have to go somewhere, if I need them to take a courier for me, or if there's something that I need. So very supportive in that sense, right? Give reasons for us being reluctant to make friends with some strangers, but being comfortable with some even after meeting them for the first time. So it's very easy to be friendly with some people, but with other people, you don't feel so comfortable and you keep your distance, right? We are often reluctant to make friends with strangers because we do not know their nature, intentions, or behavior. However, after meeting some people and interacting with them, we may discover that they are kind, trustworthy, and friendly. Shared interests and positive experiences help build confidence and comfort, which can gradually develop into friendship. So, when you spend time with someone, slowly and gradually, there develops a bond of trust, and they can then be our friends, right? Now, narrate in 100 words an incident which illustrates the way a friend of yours made you feel accepted and happy at some point in your life. So, you can write about an incident where you were going through something, or you felt you did not belong, or you were not good enough, but your friend made you feel accepted and welcome and happy. Now, इन चीजों में एक चीज याद रखने वाली ये है that even if it is not true, you can write something imaginative which sounds true. आपके साथ ना हुआ हो, आपके दोस्त के साथ हुआ हो, आपने कहीं पढ़ा हो उसके बारे में, पढ़ा भी ना हो तो आप इमेजिन करके लिख सकते हो, बट पढ़ने वाले को लगना चाहिए that it is true. That is the ground rule. It has to sound true. It should not sound made up. To sound true. When I was new at school, I felt nervous and lonely because I did not know anyone. One day, a classmate called Rahul came to me during lunch and invited me to sit with his friends. He introduced me to everyone and included me in their games and conversations. His kindness made me feel welcome and accepted. Soon, I became comfortable in my new environment and made new friends. I still remember how this simple gesture changed my first days at school. So it doesn't have to be something big and fancy. जब कोई नया आता है स्कूल में तो छोटी छोटी चीजों से you feel supported, you feel accepted, right? So you can write something like that. It doesn't have to be something grand and fancy. ठीक है, तो ये question 6 हमारा, it is all of creative writing. You must do all these writing exercises. Okay. Now this is the last question of the day. This is indirect speech. Do you like your school? Asked the boy. So this is in dialogue form. Dialogue is direct speech. Right? So the boy asked Jo whether she liked her school. I don't go to school. I'm a businessman. Girl, I mean, answered Jo. So Jo replied that she did not go to school and added that she was a businessman, then corrected herself and said she was a girl. See? Jo flourished her broom as she called out, "How do you do? Are you sick?" Laurie opened the window and croaked out as hoarsely as a raven. "Better, thank you. I've had a bad cold and been shut up a week." So, changing this into indirect speech, Jo flourished her broom and asked the boy how he was and whether he was sick. Laurie opened the window and replied that he was better. He then added that he had had a bad cold and had been shut up for a week. Third question. The pretty one is Meg and the curly head is Amy, I believe. Laurie, how did you find that out? Said Jo. So what does Laurie say to her? Laurie said the pretty one was Meg and that the curly head one was Amy, he believed. Jo asked him how he had found that out. Right? "I'm not afraid of anything," returned Jo with a toss of her head. "I don't believe you are," exclaimed the boy. Jo declared that she was not afraid of anything. The boy exclaimed that he did not believe her. Right? So we've completed the changing into indirect speech as well. So we've done the questions. We're done with chapter 1 today. What you will get at the end of the class is this resource. which has your answers to your icebreakers, right? This has the summary of your chapter. In very short, because it's a very long chapter, this has most of the important incidents in the story. And then all the new words that you've learned in this chapter, the word, its meaning in Hindi, Marathi, and then a sentence as an example where these words have been used. Make sure you practice writing these sentences. Make your own sentences. If you can't come up with a sentence, you can also use the ones here, but use them for writing. Okay? These are all the new words. And then these are the questions that we just discussed today in order. Make sure you write and practice. Okay? Don't revise orally by reading. Make sure you write down and then practice for your English. Okay? So this resource will be shared with you at the end of the class. All right, Bete? Any questions?
No questions, ma'am.
How many of you are practicing by writing? It's important for you to write and practice because English is a new language for us. है ना? हमें सुनने को नहीं मिलती, हमें पढ़ने को नहीं मिलती unless we pick up a novel and read. So it's important for us to write. Our exam means writing. Okay? So it's important for us to write and practice to be able to do well in a written exam. All right? Okay, beta. I'll see you in the next class. Prerna,
Okay.
you can please stop recording. Thank you.